you'll regress even further because of the fact that if you're not adapting, you're always regressing. Why? Because entropy. Entropy will always be fighting to cause your tissues to break down in time, as will accommodation. So really, if you think about exercise science, I would argue that warding off accommodation has always been the main goal of exercise science. If exercise science is put in place to help us understand how to make more efficient and beneficial adaptations in our clients, then in order to continuously cause adaptation, we have to ward off accommodation. Because as soon as you start to accommodate, you stop adapting. In all research that has been gone into strength science has really been research into the science of warding off accommodations. However, the problem being, though, is that we've always looked at accommodation from an external perspective. For example, we'll say things like, when you're exercising, you have to cycle through the exercises. Again, I'm not saying that's not false. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be cycling through and changing the variables. That is actually 100% necessary in order to avoid accommodation. But the problem is not avoiding external accommodation. Everything external is going to accommodate, because everything external is the production of internal assemblages, right? Your external movements are simply an expression of your internal function. So the actual point of accommodation that occurs is not externally, it's internally. Going back to our four truths, if all movements are created internally, and all movements are executed internally, and internal constraints are the first to overcome, and external displays of movement are an expression of internal function, therefore, there is no such thing as external accommodation if there is a constantly changing internal environment. It's only when we have internal stagnation, where there is no more adaptation occurring in your biological elements, with which your mechanisms can then learn to use in a more beneficial way. If we just stop adaptation where it is by constantly externally training, the internal environment is really what starts to break down, and the internal environment therefore leads to accommodation, as the internal environment, the mechanisms, try to utilize their elements in ways that ultimately utilize less energy.